report yesterday of a young girl who had brain cancer. But going back to this young boy had developed a very interesting cancer, heart cancer. So his mother sent me all the details of it. And I'm not going to mention who they are, what really happened in relation to that, but I checked up the cancer, and lo and behold, the cancer was extremely rare and has only ever been attributed to radar operators. Very, very rare. So the fact that a 5-year-old, well, obviously he was 4-year-old at the time, a 5-year-old child would develop this type of illness is unbelievable and incontrovertible that it is the streetlight phased array, illegal, unlawful, secret rollout of 5G in the gated area. That is most certainly the cause. And that poor little lad died yesterday.
My condolences to you, Mark, because I know that your heart must have been involved in the family. What he's saying here to you, it rings very true with me, because when I realized the dangers of all this stuff, it was I eventually, I was out of the military. Well, I was still in the military, but in the reserves. And my brother, who was in the Navy, he came down to Florida because he had to do some Navy work off the coast, and so I got him to tell me what he was doing, and I didn't realize that he was working with radars. And I said, whoa, I said, how long have you been working? He says, well, that's what my job is. I work with radars. And I tried to explain to him the problem with radars is it's the same thing that's in 5G. It's exactly the same thing.
It is 5G.
Okay, so because I already knew that in secret information, highly classified, that they were seeing really weird cancers in radar operators and radar technicians, particularly. But this was the military; they kept that all silent. Another thing that they kept silent, Mark, when Vietnam happened and they came out with the first night goggles, okay? What happened was it was burning the retinas. It was causing damage in the eyes. And I was a safety officer of the company, and I was called to this meeting, a highly secret meeting, and they're telling us this. And I said, well, how do we tell the troops this? How do we tell the people that have been exposed to this that they're gonna have blindness in a few years? And they said, oh no, you can't tell anybody. This is secret. Can you imagine?
Well, what I really can't imagine, I mean, the same technology was used in the Google Glass. What I cannot understand is how this killer technology, I mean, if I was to build, and I've been involved in a number of weapon sight systems, we use the 560 nanometers. And the reason why we use that, not that it's 100% safe, it's just far less biologically active than either full spectrum or the blue spectrum light. So obviously you use the green spectrum. That's why weapon sight systems are mainly green, because they're less damaging to the retina. Full spectrum light's pretty damaging. I mean, we did some research where where retinal cells in vitro, where they were tested against these blue LED emitters, we had less than 20% survivability. So you can imagine, and I think full spectrum was something like 40% survivability, where green spectrum, the 560 nanometers, was near fine. Slight bit of damage. But you get damage in the retina with any optical radiation, because obviously optical radiation is a well-known classified carcinogen and a hazard. So it's so the evidence was definitely there, but it's interesting what you're saying. So how do we get to the point where we've got gaming headsets that large technology companies are rolling out en masse across the whole population, offering for children to test in schools, using pulse modulated full spectrum microwave, terahertz range pulse modulated light, which is, I mean, makes microwaves look like something that's not that dangerous, believe it or not. especially when you focus them through a magnifying glass onto a child's retina. It's pretty bizarre. It's probably the reason why they brought 5G out, to kill everybody before their children die of eye cancer. But anyway, that's another story. So we've got children being harmed. We've got children getting brain cancer. We've got children dying. All on the back of someone's idea that they think it's a good idea to spy on us.
Mark, let me ask you about the brain cancer in the child, which was a rare form of cancer previously associated with radar operators, right?
Well, that was
That, I mean, how can we share this on a solid basis with like epidemiological evidence of proximity to either one of the LED street lamps or a small cell tower in Gateshead? How can we establish, an evidentiary connection that can't be dismissed as like, oh yeah, those people on, they're 5G activists making wacky, connections and theories, because obviously this, the link to a very rare form of cancer associated with radar operators, that's big, in a community in which 5G has just been rolled out. That, can we? Because I'd love to go, more public with this, and we always need to be careful. Often, we are lured out to be exposed, with going out there with slightly inaccurate information. They nail you. They destroy your credibility. They say, oh, look at what these wild claims they're making, and there's no basis because of this and that. I'd love to be able to, if this is, obviously this sounds quite real and substantial, and I'd love to be able to just go out there with it with high confidence, with some evidence that would hold up in court or hold up with epidemiological studies. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, before we do that, let's just get a time frame. I asked you earlier before we got on the show, when did they put the lights in Gateshead?
The first knowledge I had of them, they started the rollout sometime in 2013, 2012, 2013. But what they did, they fitted the street light, and it was to the main highways. Now, obviously, the main highways are a lot higher up, so the directional antennas would scan over the top of most homes. Yeah, you'd have to be at a pretty long distance away, maybe 15 or 20 mile away for that ray to come to basically hit a home, obviously with a slight curvature. So the first rollout was the main highways. They were very, very high up. The lamps, well above the height of a home. And then when I believe that was either 2013, 2014, they started putting the lights in the streets. Well, there was a lot lower down. In fact, the directional that directly opposite people's bedroom windows. It wasn't until 2016, September 2016, when they rocked up outside of my home. And obviously, I already knew that the LED streetlights weren't exactly safe, but I've got blackout blinds. Nobody's been warned about that either. And they rocked up with these LED streetlights that looked a bit unsafe. And then I had neighbours knocking on doors telling us about nosebleeds. So that's basically the time frame. So 2016 was, my factual evidence when I knew that they'd roll this stuff out. It took me till it was about mid-2017 when I had one of these transmitters thrown at me by one of their lighting guys. What actually happened, I was coming down the street and I said to the chap, "What are you doing up there?" Because obviously a lot of them being destroyed where I lived. I don't know why. Anyway, come back this night in the afternoon and there was a lighting guy and he was fixing the light, and I explained to him, I said, "Look, that will kill a baby. They are murdering babies. That transmitter is illegal." Anyway, he said something along the lines of, "I've been fitting them for 10 years. You don't know what you're talking about." Well, I then knew he was a liar because he hadn't been fitting them for 10 years. That wasn't true. And obviously, I'm not really keen on people that tell lies. So I had a bit shouted at him. Anyway, he ended up throwing this thing at me. And that's when I really had a good look at it and realised, I already had the technical data from the manufacturer, so I had a rough idea. But in the technical manufacturer, they didn't talk about the antenna design, the high gain antenna design. In fact, the whole technical sort of document that come with a product was false. It was a falsification of what was actually in the light system. Because obviously what was actually in the light system was a target acquiring weapon system. And I then took that, couldn't believe my eyes. I really just couldn't believe what I was looking at.
Okay, now let's just make sure that everybody understands what you were looking at. You had already gotten the manufacturer's specs for this device, and then this guy, sent by God, threw you the device. And you get the device and you compare it to the spec sheet, and you realize that this spec sheet is a bunch of crap and that this is actually a weapon system. It has nothing to do with telecommunications, correct?
Absolutely. They had actually applied for Part 15 FCC approval for the antenna, and obviously this one was a high gain. Well, that would normally apply to a dipole antenna, and it most certainly wouldn't apply to a 25 milliwatt transmitter. And obviously we were measuring radiation in people's bedrooms. You know, Part 15 FCC, I think it's about 50 meters. It can be no more than 5 milliwatt. We were millivolts, sorry. We were actually measuring in people's bedrooms 800, 4,000 millivolts. And a Part 15 FCC at 30 meters should be no more than 5. Otherwise it fails. So, but that was just it was just confirmation of the antenna design and how this antenna can focus a signal. And obviously that's what it was doing. It was sweeping the area with a scanner. It was scanning the area with this and the reason for the sub-gigahertz. And that's why people have to understand, do not do your own research. Do not believe the mainstream narrative. The higher frequencies, the 30 gigahertz, 60 gigahertz, I'm telling you now, doesn't travel in air. I can gas you with it. I can make a gas chamber with it and gas you with it, but it's not going to travel in air. So that's the equipment they're rolling out in America. They're currently putting out these reactors to gas people at 60 gigahertz because it doesn't serve any other purpose. You can't get a telecommunications signal up to 60 gigahertz. I mean, how do you do that? It's just, I mean, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy what we're talking about.
Let me ask you something. Yeah, Mark, excuse me for interrupting. You brought up a point earlier that I'd like to go into a little bit. You were talking about how the mainstream narrative in the media is that there needs to be, a small cell tower every couple of blocks. Yeah. Because millimeter microwave doesn't, it's a short wave. It's not like you can do it from one hilltop to another, 10 miles away. But you were saying that possibly in concert with the low-level satellite network being rolled out, 20,000 low-level satellites across the planet, or I wasn't quite sure, but it seemed as if you were saying that for 5G to go online with the potentially deadly effect, surveillance effect, that brain effect that we're talking about, it doesn't necessarily need to be that close. That we've got all of us looking for small cell towers going up every couple of blocks. This has been very much part of the narrative that I've been sharing with people because I thought that was a basic aspect of the technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
And are you saying now that it potentially is not, and that they could do it?
Not. Yeah, it's definitely not. The sub-gigahertz range, these small micro cells are operating the sub-gigahertz range, and the reason why they're doing that is because it's urban environment radar. Sub-gigahertz long-range radar operates mainly in the sub-gigahertz range. I mean, the weapon systems, the sweet spot for weapon systems is about 10 megahertz up to about 10 gigahertz. That's your real sweet spot. You get over there, you get a bit too high, then it's not going to be much good to you. But the real sweet spot, you see, for your target acquiring, if I want to look into the urban environment, it doesn't have to be sub-gigahertz, but once you get beyond the sub-gigahertz range, you start to get attenuation in there, you start to get it blocked by concrete and brickwork. Well, if I want to look into your home, if I want to see what's under your bed, if I want to see you having relationships in your home and spy on you, I need sub-gigahertz signal. And these microcells are operating on the sub-gig, and they're turning around saying they need lots of them. They need every couple of houses because they don't travel well in air. Well, I'm going to tell you, they travel pretty well in air. It's long-range radar. I mean, these signals have traveled 3,000 miles. These travel within the the built-up urban environment, 15 to 20 to 30 mile. And the built-up, I'm talking about going through lots of reinforced concrete here, by the way, in a cityscape. So let's say if I've got 20 or 30,000 of these, I can blanket coverage, 3D map a whole cityscape with a class 1 cancer causing radiation. But that's just so I can spy on you. That's not what this is for.
Okay, Mark, just let me stop here for a second because I want to give people a visual picture of what you're talking about. Most people now are familiar with the LiDAR concept, that you've got a laser in a plane flying over dense jungle that can see through the jungle to see what's on the ground.
Yeah.
All right, that's the same kind of technology, only it's being directed so that it can see through concrete, not just trees and foliage, but concrete and wood and everything else that might protect you from being. They can watch you walking around your house.
Absolutely. Do you want a picture? I've got a picture.
Yes, I know, and I realized that it's easier to explain what they might have seen, and it's the LiDAR they've seen,
Yeah, I've got the images. But this shows you the deception, the deceit, the dishonesty of these organisations, because you see that's the mainstream narrative, Vives. We need lots of them because they don't travel very well. It is absolute garbage. They travel with these in the urban environment, these sub-gigahertz signals. So you've got to ask yourself the question, why do they want one every couple of houses? The reason why is because it's an EMP. If you take the equipment to bits and have a look at the capacity of it, you'll see it's got this massive potential for an electromagnetic pulse. Now, obviously, if I then fill your home with all of the other equipment, your smart meter, the one I can turn up at ease, your smart fridge, I can come in the middle of the night and turn that up, and I can also come in and I can turn your Wi-Fi up. And not only that, I can change the pulse modulation. So I can change the pulse modulation and the frequencies that you were talking about before, where I can start to disassociate the molecular bonds, and then you fire the overburden, and boom, you no need to bury anybody. I mean, what a fantastic weapon. This is the greatest weapon of all time, right? I'll tell you why. You're paying for it. So you pay for your own death, and they don't even have to come and dig a hole to bury you.
Let me ask you something. Excuse me, Mark. Let me ask you something. When you're talking sub-gigahertz range, what exactly does that mean in terms of numbers? Like 2.5 gigahertz is what?
Well, anything under a gigahertz, right, is sub-gigahertz. And if you look at the industry standard, what actually happened at first, Michael, I was telling people that 5G was sub-gig, and everybody said, doesn't know what he's talking about, he's a lunatic, conspiracy theorist, he's making it up. We now know that the industry have admitted that 5G is sub-gigahertz, 700 megahertz to 900 megahertz is their sweet spot. So that's the industry, that's what they're saying. I think the US, it's about 700, it's 800 in the UK, and I think they've got the 900 spectrum in Europe. Quite interesting. That could be another very interesting aspect, the fact that they've actually changed the part of the spectrum in different parts of the world.
Well, let me share with you a piece of news that came out yesterday, and this is regarding the FCC. I shared this with you, Nancy. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet. This is from an industry magazine called Engadget. So this isn't an activist piece of news. This isn't somebody trying to alert everybody to how dangerous 5G is. This is a telecommunications industry publication that's keeping us all up to date on the wonderful rollout of the 5G system. Headline on this article is FCC Chairman wants to open mid-band airwaves for 5G. They'll vote on this in July. Let me just read a little bit of this to you. This may be relevant, it may not, but it sounds like it probably could be. Here's the article. U.S. carriers have mostly rolled out 5G on high frequencies, with upcoming auctions aiming even higher. Unfortunately, these choices create problems. The implementations typically don't work well indoors, and they risk interfering with weather forecasts and other tasks that might depend on high bands. So the FCC might provide some much-needed breathing room in lower spectrum slices. However, the FCC chairman, Ajit Pai, has circulated an order that, if approved, would open 2.5 gigahertz airwaves for 5G. This spectrum was set aside in the 1960s with services like educational TV in mind, but a large part of it has gone unused for decades, according to the FCC chairman. This would make use of mid-band wireless and would theoretically allow both incumbents and relative newcomers to claim frequencies they didn't have before. So they're looking to finalize the details of a December auction of 37 gigahertz, 39 gigahertz, and 47 gigahertz bands as part of their broader 5G FAST plan that would aim to speed up deployment of the wireless data. Is this relevant, Mark?
Well, it's definitely relevant, but I mean, you've got to remember these are masters of deception. I mean, you only have to look at Telestra, Telenza, go and have a look at their website and what it tells you. The bit of equipment that fit on the top of the street light is designed to look like a light sensor. Now ask yourself this question. If 5G is safe,